For the imperial palace of Solora stood like a monument of pride. Its shining towers reached into the violet sky, carved from living crystal that caught the light of 3 suns. Every corner glowed with elegance, every hallway whispered of ancient history. The Soloran Empire had ruled for thousands of years, their people proud, beautiful, and strong. They considered themselves the heart of civilization. On this day, the palace was filled with whispers. Nobles in long, shimmering robes gathered inside the grand hall, waiting for an unusual arrival. They had seen ambassadors from many worlds, but this would be the first time they looked upon the strange beings from Earth. The Solorans had read reports, of course. They knew humans came from a blue planet far from the core worlds. They were latecomers to the galactic community, and most nobles dismissed them as fragile. Their bodies seemed weak compared to towering warrior species. Their world lacked ancient technology. Yet rumors followed them. Rumors of stubborn endurance, of survival against impossible odds, of a fire in their spirit no one could quite explain. Princess Serenia sat at the far end of the hall, her throne high and radiant. She was heir to the throne, a figure of grace and sharp mind. Her silver-toned skin shimmered faintly, and her long eyes studied the doors with quiet curiosity. She had spent nights reading reports on Earth, trying to understand what made humans different. But words on a page were not enough. She wanted to see one with her own eyes. Finally, the massive golden doors opened. A hush fell over the nobles. The human delegation entered the hall. They did not wear long robes or jewels. Instead, they wore simple dark uniforms made for function, not for display. Their boots clicked against the shining floor, each step steady and confident. At their front walked Captain Elias Ward. Elias was not the tallest man in the galaxy. He had no glowing aura like the Soloran warriors, nor the strange colors of alien nobility. But there was something in the way he carried himself. Firm shoulders, calm steps, a gaze that moved neither too high nor too low. His uniform was plain yet clean. His hair was short, his face lined with faint scars, but his eyes held a strength deeper than weapons. When Elias reached the end of the hall, he bowed. Not too deeply, not too shallowly. It was not the bow of a servant, nor the stance of a challenger. It was simply a man showing respect to another. The nobles exchanged whispers. Some raised their eyebrows at the human's lack of fear. Others smirked, thinking him naive. Only Serenia watched in silence, her lips parting slightly. At last she spoke. Her voice rang soft but sharp like silver bells. "So this is humanity," she said. "The children of a fragile world. You arrive with bold steps, but do you truly understand the galaxy you now walk into?" Elias raised his eyes to meet hers. He smiled faintly, a smile not of arrogance but of honesty. "Perhaps not," he admitted. "But we learn fast." The nobles muttered louder, some offended by his bluntness. But Serenia's interest grew. She leaned forward, her silver hair falling like liquid light over her shoulder. "You speak as if you carry confidence," she said. "But I wonder, is it confidence or ignorance? You face empires older than your world. You face laws of nature your species has not yet tested. What gives you such calm?" Elias thought for a moment. His voice was quiet, yet it carried across the vast hall. "Because we have walked through storms, and we are still here. No empire raised us. No great power shielded us. We faced hunger, wars, and skies that turned against us. Yet every time we fell, we rose again. That is why we walk forward without fear. Because even when the universe tells us you cannot, we answer, 'Watch us.'" The hall fell into silence. Many Soloran nobles shifted uncomfortably. They had never heard such words spoken in such simple language. There was no poetry, no flowery speech, no ancient quotes, yet the raw honesty carried weight. Serenia's heart stirred against her will. She was trained to see humans as lesser beings, yet something in Elias's words made her chest tighten. It was not just what he said, it was how he said it. With no trembling, no hesitation, as if every word was carved into his very soul. "You speak boldly for one so young," Serenia whispered. Elias gave a small shrug. "Perhaps, but boldness is often the only choice we have." A ripple of laughter went through the human delegation at his simple answer. The sound was warm, unguarded, unlike the controlled laughter of Soloran nobility. Serenia found herself startled again. Their laughter carried no calculation, it was simply real. She realized in that moment that humans were different. Too different. They were not shaped by endless luxury or constant power. They were shaped by survival. by a constant struggle that had sharpened them into something rare. And for the first time in her life, Serenia, Princess of Salora, felt a spark of fascination. Her silver eyes softened, though her voice remained poised. "Very well, Captain Elias. You have stepped into my hall with no fear. You have spoken with plain words. Perhaps I will grant humanity the chance to be heard. But know this, Salora bows to no one." Elias placed his hand over his chest, a human gesture of respect.
"And humanity does not ask you to bow."
"Only to see us as we are." Something unspoken passed between them then. A current subtle but undeniable. The nobles could not name it, but Serenia felt it in her bones. This human, standing simple and scarred before her, was not like the hollow flatterers of court. He was not afraid of her crown. He was not trying to impress her with beauty or wealth. He stood before her as if saying, "I am enough as I am," and strangely, that made her breath catch. The great hall remained silent, waiting for her command. But in her heart, Serenia was no longer simply a princess. She was a woman who had just seen something rare in the universe, something that could not be ignored. The meeting in the grand hall ended with formal gestures, but Princess Serenia could not push the humans from her mind. As the nobles dispersed with whispers and dismissive laughter, she remained seated on her throne, her silver eyes lingering on Captain Elias. His words had been plain, his voice steady, yet they had cut deeper than the long speeches of diplomats. For hours after the delegation was dismissed, Serenia walked the palace gardens in silence. The Saloran night glowed faintly, for their moons were luminous, washing the marble paths in silver light. Flowers that pulsed with inner radiance bent softly toward her as she passed, but she did not notice them. Her thoughts circled around one man, one human. What gives them this fire? She wondered. What makes them speak so boldly, without fear of empire or throne? She had studied many alien cultures. She knew their strengths and weaknesses. But humans, the more she thought, the more questions grew in her heart. They were fragile compared to Salorans. Their lifespans were shorter. Their bodies lacked natural armor. Their minds lacked telepathy. Their worlds were not rich with ancient technology, and yet they had reached the stars. That night she called for her attendants. "Summon Captain Elias Ward," she commanded softly, not as a diplomat but as a guest.
"I would speak with him alone." Her attendants hesitated. Tradition frowned upon a princess meeting strangers in private, but her voice carried steel.
None dared to disobey. Elias arrived quietly, guided through winding halls until he stood in the princess's private chambers. The room was vast, filled with flowing curtains of light and floating crystal lamps, yet he did not gape in awe as others might. He simply stood tall, his hands clasped behind his back. Serenia sat by the window, the moon shining on her silver hair. She gestured lightly. "Come, sit. Tonight I am not princess, only Serenia." Elias inclined his head and took a seat opposite her. There was no fear in his eyes, only curiosity that mirrored her own. For a long moment neither spoke. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Serenia broke it. "You puzzle me, human," she admitted. "Your kind should not be here. By every measure, your species is too young, too fragile. And yet you walk into my hall as if you belong. You speak as if no power can crush you. Why?" Elias leaned back slightly, his face calm. "Because power has tried to crush us before," he said. "Nature, war, even ourselves. But we endure. Not because we are the strongest, but because we refuse to stop. That's what it means to be human." His words were simple, but they settled in her heart like stones. Still, she was not satisfied. She wanted to know more. She wanted to understand not just his mind, but his body, his people, their very way of life. "You speak of survival," she said slowly, "but survival is not enough to build a civilization. What drives you beyond survival? What drives your species to? To bond, to love, to continue?" Elias blinked, surprised by the direction of her question. He smiled faintly. "You mean family, mating?" Serenia felt her cheeks warm at his bluntness. Salorans did not speak so directly. For her people, reproduction was sacred, tied to rare cycles in their biology. Saloran females could only conceive once every 3 years, and even then only during a narrow cycle blessed by the moons. For this reason, Saloran society treated union as holy, slow, and deeply controlled. "Yes," she said carefully, "your reproduction, your bonds, I wish to understand." Elias chuckled softly, not mockingly, but with a warmth that startled her. Well, I suppose the simplest answer is this. Humans can mate year-round, anytime, no waiting for cycles. No rare alignments of moons. We don't have to ask the stars for permission. Serenia gasped before she could stop herself. Her silver eyes widened and her lips parted in shock. Year-round? She repeated. Elias nodded, his expression thoughtful. Yes, we can choose when. For us, it's not only about survival of the species, it's about closeness, love, comfort. It's a part of being alive. For a moment, Serenia could not speak. The thought hit her like a thunderclap. Her entire culture was built on waiting, on patience, on cycles, on strict traditions that controlled when love could be fulfilled. But humans were free from that chain. They could bond whenever their hearts desired. Her chest tightened, her breath shallow. That is impossible, she whispered. If what you say is true, then you live with freedom my people cannot imagine. How can you bear such endless choice? Elias's gaze softened. It isn't always easy. Choice means mistakes, and we make many. But it also means chances to love, to try again, to build families even after failure. Maybe that's why we don't give up so easily. We're always given another chance. Serenia turned her face toward the moons, hiding the turmoil in her eyes. She was a princess, trained to remain calm, but his words struck deep. For her people, love was rare, delayed, burdened by timing. For him, it was constant, like air and water. Something inside her ached. Not envy, not desire, something larger, something nameless. You are dangerous, Captain, she murmured. Elias tilted his head. Because of our weapons? She shook her head slowly, her silver hair brushing her shoulders. No, because you carry a kind of freedom the galaxy does not understand. And freedom is always the most dangerous thing of all. Elias gave no answer, but his steady eyes met hers. In that moment, she realized he was not afraid of her crown, her empire, or even her world. He looked at her as if she were simply Serenia, not princess, not heir, but a woman seeking answers, and that terrified her more than any enemy could. That night, when Elias left her chambers, Serenia remained by the window long after he was gone. The moons glowed, and the palace hummed with ancient power, but she felt only the echo of his words. Year-round. The phrase haunted her. It was more than biology. It was a key, a door into a life without chains, a life her people had never known. And deep inside, though she would never admit it aloud, Princess Serenia felt something she had not felt since childhood. Longing. The palace was never quiet. Even at night, its crystal walls hummed with energy, and the halls glowed with soft light. But for Princess Serenia, silence had settled inside her heart. No matter how many attendants bowed, no matter how many nobles brought her gifts, her mind returned again and again to the human captain, Captain Elias Ward. She tried to bury the thought, to remind herself she was heir to an empire, not a dreamer, but she could not erase the words he had spoken. Humans can mate year-round. The sentence echoed endlessly. It was not only about the act itself, it was the freedom behind it. Freedom to love without waiting for moons. Freedom to choose without permission. For the Soloran people, love was bound in chains. Women could bear children only once in 3 years during a single narrow cycle. Because of this, unions were calculated, arranged, guarded by families and tradition. Love was not a river but a drought, its waters allowed to flow only at rare intervals. And here stood a man whose people lived in an endless spring. The thought unsettled her. It tempted her. It frightened her. The next day, during council, Serenia sat with her father, the emperor, and the high nobles. The discussion was about trade routes, alliances, and threats. But Serenia's mind was elsewhere. She watched Elias from across the chamber, where the humans stood as guests. He listened calmly, speaking little, but when he did speak, every word carried weight. The nobles scoffed at him, dismissing his people as children. Yet Elias never lost composure. His patience was like stone, enduring, steady. When the council ended, Serenia found herself walking beside him as he left the hall. She spoke before she could stop herself. "Captain Elias, will you walk with me?" He glanced at her, surprised, then nodded. Of course. They walked through the palace gardens where glowing flowers bent in the wind. The air was heavy with the scent of spice and moonlight. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Serenia broke the silence. "My people think you are fragile," she said softly. They see short lives and soft bodies. They do not understand how you reach the stars. Elias smiled faintly. Fragile doesn't mean weak. A glass can shatter, but it can also reflect the brightest light. She turned to him, puzzled. You speak in riddles. No, he said gently. I mean that sometimes the things that break easily are also the most beautiful. Humans are fragile, yes. We bleed, we age, we die. But that fragility makes us fight harder to live. It makes every moment precious, every bond stronger, every love deeper. Serena's chest tightened. His words touched something hidden inside her. For Solorans, centuries passed like long shadows. Time dulled passion. Waiting dulled desire. But for humans, time was a fire burning bright and fast. She whispered almost to herself. Perhaps that is why you can love so freely. Elias looked at her, curious. What do you mean? Serena hesitated. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to speak. My people, we cannot love as you do. Our bodies permit only rare cycles. Our unions are chained to the moons. We wait years for a chance, and even then most bonds are arranged, not chosen. Love for us is not a river. It is a desert. Elias listened silently, his expression softening. He did not laugh, did not mock, did not pity. He only listened. Finally, he said quietly, That sounds lonely. The word pierced her like a blade. She stopped walking, her silver eyes wide. Lonely. No one in her empire had ever dared describe their way of life in such plain truth. Yet the moment he spoke it, she felt the weight of it. Loneliness, wrapped in tradition, disguised as honor. Her throat tightened. It is our way, she whispered. It has always been so. Elias nodded slowly. Maybe so. But ways can change. No empire lasts forever without change. His words were dangerous. If any noble had heard, they would have called it treason. But Serena felt no anger. Instead, she felt hope. Fragile, forbidden hope. That night, she could not sleep. She walked her chamber in restless circles, her heart pounding. She had seen wars, politics, and lies, but nothing had unsettled her as much as the truth of one human's words. She sat by the window, staring at the moons, and whispered to herself, Lonely. The word burned. She thought of her own life. Born a princess, surrounded by beauty, but never free. Every friendship watched. Every choice measured. And love? That was a luxury she could not even dream of. For the first time in her life, she envied another species. The following days, she sought Elias more often. Always in secret, always under the excuse of diplomacy. But each time her questions strayed beyond politics. Do humans love easily? She asked. Not easily, Elias answered. But deeply. Sometimes too deeply. Do you fear heartbreak? Always, but we risk it anyway. Because even heartbreak means we lived. His answers fascinated her, frightened her, yet pulled her closer. Every conversation was a window into a world she had never imagined. And slowly, dangerously, something began to grow inside her. Not just curiosity, not just fascination, but a warmth that spread each time she saw him smile. Each time his steady eyes met hers without fear of her crown. One evening, while walking in the garden, she finally dared to speak what had been locked in her chest. My people believe love is a chain, but when I look at you, when I hear your words, I begin to wonder. Perhaps love is a flame, and perhaps I have never seen it until now. Elias stopped walking. For a long moment he only looked at her, his face unreadable. Then quietly he said, A flame can burn, but it can also warm. Maybe your people have only seen the fire from far away. Maybe it's time someone felt its warmth. Her breath caught. No man of her empire had ever spoken to her like that. No hesitation, no fear, just truth. And in that truth, Princess Serenia felt her world tilt. For the first time, she did not feel like an heir, a ruler, or a symbol. She felt like a woman standing at the edge of something vast and dangerous, something she wanted to step into. That night, alone in her chambers, she pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the wild beat of her heart. This is madness, she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew the truth. Madness had never felt so alive. The palace had always been a place of order. Every noble knew their place, every servant knew their duty. But lately something unseen stirred in the air. The cause was not war or famine, it was whispers. Whispers about the princess. Princess Serenia had begun to change. The nobles noticed it first in her eyes. She no longer listened to long speeches with the same patient emptiness. Her gaze, once calm and distant, now carried a strange fire. She asked sharper questions during council, questions that unsettled the old lords. And most dangerous of all, she spent too much time with the human. Captain Elias Ward had become the center of endless gossip. Some called him bold, others foolish. Many mocked his plain manners. Yet none could deny that the princess sought his company more than any noble of Selora. One evening, Serinya walked through the palace corridors, her silver gown trailing behind her. A group of nobles bowed, but as she passed, she caught their whispers. She lowers herself with that. Human, one said. An heir should not waste her time with primitives, another sneered. They say humans can breed without limit. A third laughed softly. Perhaps she is curious in ways unbecoming. Serenya's heart clenched. She kept walking, her face calm, but inside a storm brewed. The noble's words carried poison, not only toward her but toward Elias. They reduced his people to whispers of flesh, mocking the very thing that had shaken her soul, their freedom to love without chains. That night she could not rest. She sat at her table staring at her reflection in a crystal mirror. Her silver eyes looked weary, her lips pressed tight. Am I losing myself? She thought. Or am I finally finding who I truly am? The next day she sought Elias again. They met in a quiet garden, hidden by tall crystal trees that glowed faintly in the moonlight. You should be careful, she told him softly. The nobles speak of us. They do not understand, and they will not forgive. Elias gave a small shrug. I've lived through worse whispers. Words don't break bones, she frowned. But words can break empires. He studied her, then asked, Does it trouble you? What they say? Serena turned away, her hands clasped tightly. It should not. I am heir to Selora. I should care only for duty. And yet it does trouble me. Not because they speak of me, but because they reduce you to something less than what you are. Elias stepped closer, his voice calm. Serena. People will always fear what they don't understand. Your nobles look at us and see something that doesn't fit their rules. That frightens them. But fear doesn't change truth. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with conflict. And what truth is that? That humans are not here to be measured against Seloran standards, he said firmly. We are who we are. Different, flawed, but real. Her chest ached at his words. Real. That was what she felt around him. Something real, raw, unpolished. Something she had never known in the careful theater of the court. Days turned into weeks. The bond between them deepened, though they both tried to hide it. To the court they spoke of trade and alliances. In private they spoke of life, of dreams, of the weight of crowns and the cost of freedom. Serena found herself laughing with him, a sound she had not truly known since childhood. Elias told her stories of earth, of seas that roared like thunder, of forests that breathed with life, of cities where millions lived side by side. She listened as if hearing songs from another world, and in return she confessed pieces of her heart she had never shared. Her loneliness, her envy of the humans' freedom, her fear that her people had built cages of tradition too strong to ever break. Elias never judged. He only listened. Sometimes that was all she needed, but the whispers did not fade. They grew louder. One night the emperor summoned Serena to his private chamber. He was old, his silver skin faded, but his eyes still carried the weight of centuries. Daughter, he said slowly, you walk on dangerous ground. The nobles bring me rumors. They say you grow too close to the human captain. Serena's heart pounded, but she kept her voice calm. We speak often, father. He is different, yes, but his words are worth hearing. The emperor's gaze sharpened. Different can be dangerous. Remember who you are. You are not simply Serena. You are the blood of Selora. You cannot afford curiosity that weakens the crown. Her lips trembled, but she bowed her head. Yes, father, but inside rebellion stirred. Is love weakness? Is freedom danger, or is it the only truth worth holding? The next time she met Elias, her heart was heavy. She told him of her father's warning. Elias listened, his jaw tight. Then he said, You have to decide what matters more, the whispers of tradition or the voice inside you. I can't make that choice for you. She stared at him, her chest burning. And if I choose wrongly, if I bring ruin upon my people? Elias's eyes softened. Then at least it will be your choice, not a cage someone else built for you. Tears filled her eyes, though she blinked them away. She had been trained never to cry before others. But Elias's words broke the dam she had built for years. For the first time, she felt seen, Not as a princess, not as an heir, but as a soul longing for freedom. That night, as she lay awake, Serena whispered into the darkness, "They call him fragile. They call me foolish. But perhaps together we are simply human." The word tasted strange on her tongue, but it filled her with warmth. And in the silence of her chamber, Princess Serena made her first quiet vow. She would not let fear silence her. Even if the whole empire whispered, she would hold on to the flame that Elias had shown her. The whispers had turned into storms. By now, every noble in the palace knew of the princess's closeness to the human captain. Some mocked her behind jeweled fans, others muttered in dark corners, and a few sharpened their voices into open scorn. But worst of all, suspicion had reached the outer courts. Priests of the moon temples began to murmur that Serena was straying from the sacred cycles. Guards looked twice when Elias passed, their hands resting near their weapons. Even the servants, once silent, now traded looks of curiosity and fear whenever the human's name was spoken. The empire was watching, and it did not watch kindly. One evening, as Serena walked the balcony overlooking the glowing city, her friend and attendant Lysera approached. Lysera had served her since childhood, and though she was loyal, her face carried worry. "My princess," she said gently, "the nobles sharpen their tongues against you. They say the human has cast a spell. They say you are no longer yourself." Serena gripped the balcony rail, her knuckles pale. "And what do you say, Lysera?" The attendant lowered her eyes. "I say you smile more than I have ever seen. I say you breathe more freely when he is near. But I also say the court will not forgive you for it." Her words struck deep. For years, Serena had lived by duty, never by choice. Yet here was someone who gave her joy, and still the world called it a crime. That same night, Elias was summoned in secret. He entered her chamber quietly, his face calm but his eyes alert. He had heard the whispers, too. "They don't like us speaking," he said simply. Serena nodded, her heart heavy. "They say you have bewitched me." Elias gave a faint smile. "That would be easier than the truth." She tilted her head, curious. "And what is the truth?" "That maybe," he said softly, "you've simply found someone who listens." No spell needed. Her breath caught at his words. No one else in her life had ever spoken to her without walls, without masks. His honesty was sharper than any blade, and yet it made her feel safe. But safety was fragile. And soon, it broke. 2 nights later, during a grand feast, the storm finally struck. The great hall was filled with nobles in shimmering robes, their laughter echoing under crystal chandeliers. The emperor sat at the high table, his gaze heavy with age. Serena sat beside him, her posture perfect, though her thoughts were elsewhere. Across the hall, Elias stood with his delegation, calm as always. Then a voice cut through the music. "Why does the heir of Salora waste her gaze on a human?" The words came from Lord Vanar, one of the oldest nobles, his pride sharp as his jeweled crown. He stood pointing a long finger at Elias. "This fragile creature has bewitched our princess. He speaks plain words and she forgets centuries of law. He is no ally, he is a danger." The hall erupted in murmurs. All eyes turned to Serena, her chest burned. She knew silence would protect her. She knew tradition demanded obedience. But when she saw Elias standing tall under the weight of scorn, something inside her broke free. She rose to her feet, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Enough." The hall fell silent. Every noble stared wide-eyed. Serena's silver eyes blazed as she looked around the room. "You call him fragile. You call him dangerous. But you do not see what I see. You do not hear what I hear. He speaks with truth when others drown me in lies. He carries scars of struggle when others wear jewels of idleness. He is not danger, he is reminder. Reminder that freedom is still possible." The nobles gasped. Some shouted in outrage, others whispered in shock. The emperor's face darkened, his hand tightening on the throne. Lord Vanar sneered. "Freedom? You speak of freedom as if it were a gift. But freedom breaks empires. Do you wish to see Salora fall, princess?" Serena's heart pounded, but she did not falter. "No, I wish to see Salora live. And perhaps the only way to live is to learn from those who walk unchained." Gasps filled the hall. The words were too bold, too sharp. The emperor rose slowly, his presence silencing the chamber. His voice was heavy as stone. "Daughter, you shame the throne." The words cut deeper than any blade. Serena bowed her head, her body trembling, but she did not take them back. Not this time. That night the palace burned with whispers louder than fire. The nobles gathered in secret, plotting, fearful that the heir herself was drifting from tradition. And in her chamber, Serinya sat alone, her heart torn. She had spoken her truth before all, yet it felt like holding fire in bare hands. Every word scorched her, but still she would not let go. A knock sounded at her door. Elias entered quietly. "You spoke bravely tonight," he said. She gave a weak smile. "And now I may lose everything." He shook his head. "No, you may have just found it." Her throat tightened and she whispered, "Elias, I do not know if I am strong enough." He stepped closer, his voice steady. "Strength isn't about never bending. It's about standing back up after you fall. You've carried chains your whole life. Maybe it's time you tried walking without them." Tears stung her eyes. She turned away, ashamed. "If I fall, my people will suffer. I cannot be selfish." He placed a hand gently over hers. "Wanting freedom isn't selfish. It's human." The word struck her chest like a drum. Human. She, a princess of Silora bound by moons and cycles, felt something she had never dared, the desire to be human. And in that moment, though the Empire whispered against her, though her father's shadow loomed, Serinya made another vow. She would not turn away from this path, even if it meant standing against the Empire itself. The palace walls had always been heavy, but now they felt like a prison. After the feast, after her bold words, Serinya could not walk a hall without feeling the burn of eyes on her back. Servants no longer bowed with respect. They bowed with fear. Nobles whispered louder than ever, their poisoned words carried by the marble floors. And her father, the emperor, had grown silent. Too silent. Silence in the court of Silora was never safety. Silence was storm. 3 days later, the storm broke. Serinya was summoned to the throne room. The vast chamber glowed with cold light, banners of silver and blue hanging high above. The nobles lined the sides like predators waiting to strike. At the center, the emperor sat unmoving, his crown shining like a blade. Elias was there too. Guarded, watched. His hands were free, but the steel in the soldier's eyes told everyone he was one step from chains. Serenya's chest tightened. The emperor's voice thundered. "Daughter, you have shamed your bloodline. You spoke words that should never be spoken in front of the court. You raised the name of a stranger above your own people. And now," he lifted his hand. A scroll was brought forward. Its seal glowed with the mark of judgment. "You must prove your loyalty." The scroll was opened. The words inside were cruel in their simplicity. The human captain must leave Silora at once, or he must face trial as a corrupter of the air. Serinya froze, her heart twisting. She looked at Elias, but his face remained calm, unreadable, as though he had known this was coming. The nobles smirked, pleased. To them, this was the perfect trap. If Serinya defended him, she would be seen as lost to human influence. If she stayed silent, the bond she had formed would be shattered forever. The emperor's gaze pinned her like iron. Choose. Her throat burned. She wanted to shout, to fight, to defy, but her father's shadow was vast and the empire itself stood behind him. Slowly she whispered, "He is no corrupter." Gasps filled the chamber. The emperor's face darkened. "Do you deny the law? Do you spit on tradition?" Serenya's voice trembled, but she did not stop. "I deny the lie. He has done nothing but speak with honesty. If truth is corruption, then perhaps it is not him who is guilty." The chamber erupted into chaos. Nobles shouted, priests muttered curses, guards shifted uneasily, and then Elias stepped forward. His voice was calm, but it cut through the noise like steel. "Enough. If it is me you fear, then place the blame on me, not on her. She has done no wrong. She only dared to see me as I am." The emperor's eyes narrowed. "You admit to corrupting her?" Elias shook his head. "No, I admit to caring for her. And if that is crime enough, then so be it." The room fell silent. Serenya's heart pounded. She wanted to reach for him, to hold him, to scream that this was wrong. But before she could speak, her father gave the command. "Guards, take him." Steel rang as soldiers closed in. Elias did not resist. His hands were bound, his calm face unbroken, though Serinya saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. "No," she cried, stepping forward. "You cannot." The emperor's voice was thunder. "You are heir to Silora. Remember who you are. If you stand with him, you stand against your people." Tears blurred her vision. She looked at Elias struggling with chains, and for the first time, He allowed himself a smile. A quiet, small smile that said more than words. "It's all right," he whispered. "Stand tall, Serenia." But his words shattered her. That night, Serenia sat alone in her chamber, her body trembling. The city lights shone below, but they brought no comfort. She could still hear the sound of chains. She could still see Elias being led away. Her hands shook as she covered her face. For the first time since childhood, she wept not as a princess, but as a girl. Lost, broken, afraid. Lysera found her there, crumpled on the floor. She tried to comfort her, but Serenia shook her head. "He was the only one who ever saw me, Lysera, and now he will die for it." Lysera knelt beside her, her voice soft. "Then you must decide, princess. Are you heir of Salora, bound by chains? Or are you something more?" Serenia lifted her tear-stained face, and for a heartbeat the fire in her eyes returned. Something more. 2 days later, the trial was announced. The nobles were hungry, eager to see the human broken, eager to see the princess humbled. But Serenia walked among them with her head high, though her heart thundered in her chest. She had made her choice. She would not stay silent. She would not watch the only soul who made her feel alive be destroyed. And as the trial began with the galaxy's eyes upon her, Serenia prepared to break the chains of her throne. For Elias, for herself, for freedom. The grand trial chamber was filled with cold silence. Marble walls towered high. Silver banners swayed like frozen rivers, and every noble in Salora crowded into the circle. The priests of the Moon Temple sat at the edges, their white eyes glowing with judgment. The emperor himself stood tall on his throne, his crown shining like fire against shadow. At the center of the chamber, Elias knelt in chains. His uniform was torn, but his back was straight, his eyes calm. He did not plead, did not beg. He simply waited, as though daring the empire to do its worst. And above him, on a raised platform, Serenia stood. The heir to the throne, the voice of Salora, her silver gown flowing like water. Her heart thundered inside her chest, but her face was calm, cold, unreadable, because she knew every eye was on her. The emperor's voice boomed, carrying across the chamber. "Daughter, people of Salora, today we judge the human who has dared to trespass beyond his station. He has whispered false truths into the ear of the heir. He has broken sacred balance. For this the law demands death." The nobles cheered softly, hungry for blood. Serenia's stomach twisted. Her hands trembled, hidden within her sleeves. Her mind screamed with fear, but her heart burned with fire. The emperor turned toward her, his gaze sharp as a blade. "And you, Serenia, will seal his fate. Speak the law. End this shame." The chamber grew still. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. Serenia looked down at Elias. He lifted his eyes to her, calm as the stars. And in his gaze she saw no fear, no anger, only the same steady truth he had shown her since the day they met. Her throat tightened. Memories flooded her. His voice telling her she was more than chains. His laughter that warmed her nights. His strength that stood unbroken before scorn. And she remembered his words. Wanting freedom isn't selfish. It's human. Her heart blazed. She stepped forward. "My father," she said, her voice echoing, "the law is not truth. The law is not justice. It is chains. Chains that bind me, chains that bind us all. And this human, he did not corrupt me. He freed me." Gasps rang through the chamber. Nobles cried out in outrage. Priests hissed curses. But Serenia's voice only grew louder. "You ask me to condemn him, but I will not. Because he showed me a life beyond duty. He showed me choice. He showed me what it means to live with fire in the heart, not chains on the soul, and I will not return to silence." The emperor's face darkened with rage. "Serenia, you betray your people." "No," she shouted, her voice breaking. "I love my people, but I will not lead them with lies. I will not rule by fear. If I am to be heir, then let them know the truth. I choose freedom. I choose him." The chamber erupted into chaos. The guards stepped forward, swords drawn. Nobles screamed. Priests chanted. And in that storm, Serenia leapt from her platform, rushing down the steps, her gown flying like silver fire. She reached Elias, falling to her knees, her hands clutching his bound wrists. "Elias," she whispered, tears shining in her eyes, "I will not let them take you." His calm cracked for the first time. His eyes softened. "Serenia!" But before he could speak more, soldiers grabbed him, dragging him back. Serenia rose, fury blazing in her chest. "Stop!" she cried. Her voice rang with power sharper than steel. For the first time she spoke not as daughter, not as heir, but as something more. If you harm him, then you no longer have an heir. I will not stand for this empire. I will not wear your crown. The words struck like lightning, the chamber froze. Nobles gasped. Priest fell silent. Even the emperor, for a moment, seemed stunned. Serenia tore the silver circlet from her brow and cast it to the floor. The sound echoed like thunder. The emperor's face twisted with fury. You would throw away your birthright for a human? For a fleeting passion? Serenia lifted her chin, her voice steady. Not passion, truth. You bind your people in cycles of obedience. Humans, they live every day with choice, with fire, with love that does not wait for moons or seasons. You call them fragile. I call them free, and I will walk with them, even if it costs me everything. Her words cut through the chamber like fire through dry wood. Elias, still in chains, stared at her with awe. For the first time, the unshakable captain's eyes glistened with tears. The nobles shouted in anger, but their voices shook with fear. The priests tried to chant, but their words faltered. And the guards, once eager to draw steel, now hesitated, unsure whether to follow orders or listen to the fire in her voice. The emperor roared, You are no daughter of mine. Serenia's heart ached, but she did not falter. Perhaps not. But I am my own. Silence fell. For the first time, the chains around her life shattered. She had chosen. Truly chosen. The emperor turned away, his pride too wounded to answer. His silence was permission enough. Slowly, the guards loosened their grip on Elias. His chains were unlocked, falling to the ground with a heavy clatter. Serenia rushed to him, her hands trembling as she touched his face. He smiled through the storm. You really are braver than you think, he whispered. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Not braver, just finally alive. That night, Solora was not the same. The nobles scattered in fear. The priest whispered of omens, and the emperor locked himself in silence. But Serenia walked out of the palace gates beside Elias. No crown on her brow, no chains on her hands. Only fire in her heart. The people watched from the streets, silent, curious. And when the woman looked at them with shining eyes, she did not speak as ruler but as soul. Freedom, she whispered. It begins with choice. And the people slowly began to bow. Not to a princess, but to a voice that dared to be true. As the stars lit the night sky, Elias took her hand. For the first time, she felt what it meant to walk unchained. And though the empire trembled, though storms awaited, Serenia smiled. Because in the heart of a human, she had found more than love. She had found the courage to be free.